Україна!
Понад усе!
Україна!
Понад усе!
Україна!
Понад усе!
Героям України тричі!
Слава! Слава!
Good evening, my friends. Thank you very much for coming here today to our rally. We're going to start as usual. Today there's a lot of good news that we want to give to every single one of you, my friends, and anybody who's passing by. But before we go there, let's start, as we always do, with the Ukrainian anthem. Perhaps in just a few minutes. So I will start by giving you one of the good news that we have, one of them. There's a certain resolution being discussed in the EU to block Orban from voting, because Orban has been sticks into wheels of the progress of the entry of Ukraine into the European Union. And at long last, finally, people are starting to see this traitor for what he truly is. Somebody who's a Russian shill, somebody who's fat with Russian money, whose pockets are full of Russian rubles. So he has an invested interest in destroying the EU from within. And this resolution, hopefully it passes, because it is great news for the EU and for the whole free world. Because indeed, if Russia or any other of the countries of the terrorist states who are waging war against the free world can just buy off one politician, can just buy off one leader in an alliance, and then completely freeze that alliance and not allow them to make a single move because that person simply vetoes every single resolution. Well, my friends, that's a very flimsy way of moving forward. We can't keep going on like that. So that is why it's very good that Orban will at last be put on his place. That is what we hope for, my friends, and that is what we will achieve. And now, my friends, the Ukrainian anthem.
Усміхнеться доля, згинуть наші вороженьки, як роса на сонці, запануємо ми, браття, у своїй сторонці. Душою тілом ми положим за нашу свободу і покажем, що ми браття козацького роду. Душою тілом ми положим за нашу свободу і покажем, що ми браття козацького роду.
Слава Україні!
Героям слава!
Слава нації!
Смерть ворогам!
Україна!
Понад усе!
Україна!
Понад усе!
Україна!
Понад усе!
Героям України тричі!
Слава! Слава! Слава!
Here's a little bit of funny news for all of you guys. I'm sure you've heard about Lukashenko, the proxy leader of Belarus. The individual who's just like Orban in Putin's pocket. But except when Orban maintains this facade of being part of NATO and part of the EU, of being a loyal member of the EU, in reality he's obviously in Putin's pocket. Then Lukashenko is obviously in Putin's pocket. It's visible to anyone. And he admits it. He's been saying it throughout his life. In fact, it became a meme that he was saying he would be made a colonel by Putin. And Solovyov, of all people, one of the Russia's biggest propagandists, actually laughed in his face. You know, one of the propagandists of Russia literally was doing an interview with the leader of a country, the leader of Belarus, and he laughed in his face. because Lukashenko was sounding so stupid. Lukashenko was basically saying that Putin would make him a colonel. And when Solovyov asked him, well, how does that work? Putin is the president of Russia, you're the president of Belarus. How would you be made a colonel? And he would say, he'll make me a colonel of the Russian army, which is the Soviet army, and we will have two colonels in that army, me and Vladimir Vladimirovich. By that he means Putin. And Solovyov couldn't help it, he just laughed, because it sounded so silly. But I digress, my friends. This individual has made a new policy not too long ago. He passed a new law that exempts a certain person from any kind of responsibility. It gives them immunity, political immunity against any kind of repercussions. You'll never guess who he made that law for. Himself. So that after he is no longer the president of Belarus, he will not be held accountable to any of these crimes. Because now it's part of the Belarus constitution that the ex-president cannot be held accountable. I mean, truly, it's interesting. It's very interesting. And it shows once again that these individuals are shaking in their boots. They know that there will be consequences for their actions. And those consequences, my friends, will be brought forward by our hands. If we all stand together and work together for a greater goal, Ukraine will win and the world will become better. All together, we will win.
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 Fight the jets for Ukraine.
Fighter jets for Ukraine.
Fight the jets for Ukraine.
Fighter jets for Ukraine.
Fight the jets for Ukraine.
Fighter jets for Ukraine.
Air defense 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 for Ukraine.
Another bit of good news is that a few of the most expensive pieces of equipment, some of the Russian reconnaissance planes have been downed near the border with Ukraine.
New submarines.
Exactly, new submarines, except these are the planes that have been landed. Just like Prigozhin's plane, except instead of the Russians downing their own people, this time it's the Ukrainians downing the Russians. But the result is the same. So it's still good news, my friends. And I heard that one of these specific planes had an extortionate price of $500 million. 500 million, just gone like that, in a millisecond. That's very interesting, my friends. Of course, the Russians have been trying to cover this up, just like the losses of the many ships that they have suffered in the Black Sea. It's truly a meme that a nation with no navy is giving naval casualties to a nation with a navy. It's truly interesting. And now, my friends, for the best news of them all, I saved the best for last. Russia is tasting some of their own medicine right now. Many of the Russians are freezing in their homes because their government is not interested in providing them with the basic commodities. Now, these issues with water, with gas, with heat, with electricity, with all of the different commodities necessary for life, these issues have their origin in a single bit of decisions that has been made by the Russians. When they captured the different regions of Ukraine, of southeastern Ukraine, which they temporarily hold at the moment, they decided to show off to the rest of the world and claim like they were going to rebuild them. They were saying that they would make them function like the same of Russia, which honestly would be a downgrade, because Ukraine already had a better quality of life than the vast majority of Russia. But I digress. And they sent a huge amount of these workers, of these specialized workers, to instead work in Ukraine. And that's where they are right now. Of course, the claims of rebuilding Ukraine kind of disappeared without too much progress. Because of course the Russian terrorist regime functions in a basically corrupt way. Its corruption stems to all of the different levels of society, my friends. And that is why they have not done any progress in the rebuilding part. Because if 1 ruble goes to rebuilding something in Ukraine, then 10 rubles go to the pocket of the oligarch who has been tasked with rebuilding Ukraine. So the rebuilding is not progressing. And these individuals are in Ukraine, some of them, and others have been mobilized. Because of course, Russia has established a quota for every single big company in Russia to send a certain amount of their workers as mobilized. And some of them, as you might expect, are no longer among us. So that is why, my friends, Russia is having such shortage of personnel to take care of these problems, of these issues with their commodities, with gas, with fuel, with water. Which is interesting because Russia is one of the biggest producers of gas in the whole world. And this producer of gas actually has their own people freezing in their homes. Very interesting. Truly, a paradox in the shape of a country. That is what Russia is, my friends. But that is not the only issue with the commodities. There is an issue with money. Because every single region of Russia has been ordered to send some of the money that would usually go to their commodities to Ukraine. Once again, vast majority of that money that the Russians send to the regions that they have occupied never gets there. They get stuck in the pockets of the different oligarchs. They have sticky fingers after all. You know, they can't just allow that money to go through them without taking some for themselves. And those, my friends, are the reasons why the Russians at the moment are freezing in their own homes. Now, of course, it would be better if this were not the case. If this war was not the case. If nobody was dying, if nobody was freezing, if nobody was suffering. But it would seem like the Russian people do not take the crimes of their government seriously. And they need to start taking them seriously. Because at long last, they need to start acting decisively, to stop the Russian terrorist regime. Stop Russia, stop the war!
Stop Russia, stop the war!
Stop Russia, stop the war!